Hello, family members. I hope you're having a good day today. There's something that's a little different about hurricanes versus any other natural disaster. Usually, we have at least a few days before a hurricane hits, and we can get ready. This used to be a problem. I remember when I was a kid, we spent a lot of time in Florida. My mom and dad grew up down here. And so we'd come visit family, 2 or 3 times a year. And I was very familiar with what this part of Florida is like, Central Florida. And I remember times when I was like middle school, high school, even in college to a certain extent, there would be hurricanes forming out in the Gulf or out in the Atlantic. And there would be some concern about how severe the storms could be or where they could hit. And then ultimately, the track changed and it didn't hit where the forecasters thought it might. And so people were like, well, you know these forecasters, they don't know what they're talking about. you know there's no reason for us to evacuate. There's no reason for us to board up our houses. Maybe the power will go out if it rains a little bit, and maybe it's not going to be anything at all. We don't need to worry about it. That started changing after Hurricane Andrew, but we'll come back to that. When Hurricane Katrina hit South Florida, before it went on to go back into the Gulf and then go on to New Orleans, it was actually stronger than it was when it hit New Orleans. And it actually did a fair amount of damage. Like my uncle who lives in Parkland, Florida, had some damage. And it was a major disruption, but of course that got overshadowed by how devastating it was in New Orleans. I believe the difference between Hurricane Katrina in South Florida and Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana is that Hurricane Andrew had happened already here. Well, not here, but in Miami. I remember back in the early 90s, my family lived in Miami. They hadn't yet moved a little bit north to Parkland. And when Andrew hit, they refused to evacuate. And it was terrifying. And it's a wonder that they survived. And there were communities very near to where they lived that were just completely wiped off the map. And the state of Florida learned a lot from that. And so in the subsequent, decade or plus, we had, between those two storms, there was a chance for the infrastructure here in Florida to catch up to the reality of what a major hurricane can do. And they still have the ability to do massive damage here, but a lot of things have changed. Building codes have changed. Our infrastructure for preventing damage or mitigating damage has improved significantly. Our infrastructure for evacuations has improved significantly. Our shelter system, our communication system, the news people here in Florida are like subject matter experts on hurricanes and tornadoes because we have tornadic activity a lot as well. And so they can tell you everything you need to know plus. There's no one that you would want to trust more when it comes to what's going on with a hurricane than somebody who is, a weather person in Florida. Okay. And all that happened because we had Andrew. And we had years like 2004 when I first moved here. And within like 3 months of me moving here, we had 3 major hurricanes. And it used to be unheard of to have hurricanes in Central Florida. That wasn't something you were supposed to have to deal with in Central Florida. And now it's like, well, how many do you get a year? And how bad are they? And a lot of the time, it'll be like a tropical storm or just the edge or something that you personally have to deal with. But someone in the state of Florida is dealing with hurricanes and tropical storms on a pretty common basis throughout hurricane season every year now. And so when these events happen, we're prepared. It's sort of a running joke that if you're from Florida, when the hurricane comes, you either are like, oh, I'm too cool to pay attention to this, or you're just like so locked in, it's all you can do, and you just watch the local news or the YouTube live stream. Like I literally have the YouTube live stream on right now for the local news to see what's going on because it's hard not to obsess. You have all these days ahead of the storm arriving that you can sit there and wonder about what's going to happen, and you watch it strengthen or weaken or course changes a little bit or whatever, and it becomes an all-consuming thing. And we know where to get sandbags. We know how much water we need. We have generators. We know to get gas for the generators. We're ready to hunker down and weather the storm. I got a phone call not too long ago. I was actually starting to film this video, and I got interrupted by a phone call that was too important not to take. And it's a member of my extended non-blood family who lives in southern England. And she was calling to check in, see how I was doing with the storm, because not only, would she just be interested in doing that in general, but like we had just been talking last week about Helene because she has an app on her phone that gives her alerts for Central Florida because they like to come vacation here too. And she got an alert telling her that there was, high chance of tornadoes in my town during Helene, which is true. It just it went just north of me, and I didn't get the worst of it, thank goodness. But so we had just been talking about that like last week, literally, and now here we are. She's like, "Wow, you've got this other storm coming through, and now we've got a storm coming here." And I'm like, "Yeah, I saw that. It's wild." Because hurricanes don't go to Europe, you know? That's just not how that normally works. And the reason that I worry a lot about her, and I may in some ways be a little more worried about her than I am about us, is they don't have the infrastructure for this. They don't have, like evacuation routes probably all set up for hurricanes. They don't have like storm surge flood zones where everyone knows if they should evacuate or not. Like their forecasters aren't used to hurricanes. They're not going to be able to give the local population as much insight as our newscasters are. We have a lot more practice at dealing with these, and we're getting better with it over time because they're getting more frequent and they're getting stronger. And so we can't stop them, so we got to get better at dealing with them, and that's what we're doing as best we can. And oh gosh, it's literally just going to come right through here now. Oh, why? We're going to get so much rain. Sorry, but it's hard not to be distracted when you've got possibly category 2 hurricane going to roll straight over your house in, a couple of days. So, yeah, that looks like what I might be dealing with. And again, I'm still maybe a little more concerned about Haley in England than I am about myself, because I know my power provider has every resource available on hand to get power back. I have been through storms here before, and I know that I'm not in a place that's apt to flood. You know, I know I've got supplies and got what I need, and I'll be able to get information. If there is tornadic activity, I have a nice cement block house. I can go hide in the closet. Like, I have options. And what what do the English people have in the way of preparation for this? That's why Helene was so awful and is going to take so long to come back from in a lot of ways. Is it hit somewhere that is not normally a hurricane zone. When Hurricane Sandy rolled through New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and West Virginia, it was absolutely devastating because it hit places that are not used to hurricanes, not used to storm surge. My parents live in the geographic center of West Virginia. That's where the farm is that I grew up on. And there is still visible storm damage there from Hurricane Sandy. Like, from New York all the way into West Virginia, that storm caused damage. And those were not places that were prepared for this like we are. And they don't have the, resources on the ground that we have to deal with this. And places that don't normally have long periods of drought don't necessarily have the management resources that we have here to mitigate wildfires. Like in Florida, it's really important for there to be a good regimen of controlled burns on public lands that are left wild. Like at the Space Center, like, where they launch the rockets and whatnot, they have this like conservation area all around it. And they have to go through every once in a while and do a controlled burn to get rid of some of the scrub, underneath the trees and whatnot, because that's part of the natural processes here. And if you don't do that, then you're going to have out of control, awful wildfires. And when I was living here in the early 2000s, in like 2004, 2005, we had a lot of trouble with bad wildfires. But we haven't had that as much. And there was a long period of drought, and we still haven't had as much. And I think it's because we learned how to do controlled burns appropriately. We learned how to set up fire breaks appropriately. Places that aren't used to extreme weather events are going to be seeing them more and more frequently. And when that first real extreme weather event hits, it is going to hit like a punch to the gut. It's going to be Hurricane Katrina. It's going to be Hurricane Helene. Every single place in the world is going to start having these. And they're going to be different things. It might be tornadic activity, it might be wildfires, it might be hailstorms, it might be blizzards, it might be drought, any number of things. We're going to be seeing landslides because of excessive rain, and we're going to see avalanches, and we're going to see droughts that cause environmental impacts we can't even imagine, okay? Because the climate is changing, and with that change, that means that you have more extreme weather events in different places than you had before, and it would be a very wise thing for the things that we've learned about hurricanes to be applied everywhere. It'd be a very smart thing for the things that California has learned about earthquakes to be applied everywhere, or landslides. They actually deal with landslides pretty frequently in California, and they could probably give some information out to other states that haven't had to deal with those traditionally, but maybe will. You know, I know that there's pretty good infrastructure in some places for flash flooding. That infrastructure needs to be rolled out. That sort of like disaster response, like almost like a immune system reaction kind of thing, where you have just all of these resources that are ready to go and ready to be mobilized whenever they need to be and wherever they need to be. And I think that is something that we're getting better at on a national level. But it is so much to me. It's a shame that it seems like it's very much state to state. Like, I don't like my governor at all here in Florida, but I will say that he is competent when it comes to national disasters for the most part, and you need that here. But the truth of the matter is, you really need that everywhere. And that's something that I think we're going to have to contend with. I remember people having an attitude when I was, maybe late teens, early 20s, that you didn't need to pay attention to hurricane warnings because, oh, they'll tell you that it's going to hit here, but it never does. It's never as bad as they say it's going to be. And lately, I don't see people having that attitude so much anymore. They might have the attitude that they don't need to, like, evacuate, but honestly, reasonably, you don't need to unless you live in a flood zone or a place that is going to be very vulnerable to wind, like a manufactured house or a trailer or a camper or something like that, where there's a lot of snowbirds that'll be in trailers and campers certain times a year, not so much now, but that is something you have to be mindful of. And people who do live here that live in those more high risk, flood zones or in campers or trailers or RVs or whatever, they know where the shelters are. They may have even used them already. And they know how to evacuate for the most part. I mean, there's always new people moving to Florida, so there's always newbies. It's like something you'll see in any sort of like Florida group, who's the new Floridians who are like, oh, this is my first storm, what do I do? And then all the like grizzled old timers like me, like, it's all right, don't worry, it's fine. But like, we used to be complacent here because we had gotten lucky for a while and had some potential storms that ended up being not too bad. But as climate change increased and the storms started getting worse, we did learn how to take it seriously here. And I do believe that as a community, we are fairly well prepared. And so I think that's possible. I think that's part of it. I think that this is a model that we could use to help places that are not currently disaster prone learn how to have a disaster preparedness plan anyway, so they don't have to have that punch to the gut. Or at least when they do, they're a little better ready to recover from it. Well, I was talking about wanting to make this video with my therapist. Am I like the white middle-aged lady stereotype or what? So I was talking about this video with my therapist, and she's like, you should include your dogs in your videos because that makes them better. And I'm like, I guess she's right. So, Casey, it's been decreed. Are you in the video, buddy? Good boy. I am my good boy. He is a good boy. We'll be all right, but I will update my community page after the storm just so that nobody's worried about me, just in case. And take care of yourself, family members. If you're somewhere where this hurricane might be affecting you, make sure that you have a plan and have supplies, and you know, take care of your neighbors, and they'll take care of you too. Take care of yourself, family members. Talk to you soon. Bye.